You know, there is this incredibly haunting thought buried inside the material we're looking at today.
Oh, yeah, it really is.
And it's the kind of idea that just, well, it stops you right in your tracks. It goes like this. Woe be to the man whose dreams came true if he had the wrong dreams.
Right, which completely flips the script on how we are, conditioned to think about success.
Exactly.
We're taught to focus entirely on the mechanics of achievement, like just get it done.
Yeah.
But we do that without ever really questioning the destination itself.
Yeah, we spend so much time just obsessed with the climb. I mean, the hustle, the grind, all those productivity hacks.
For sure.
But the core metaphor of our deep dive today,
Yeah.
which, by the way, draws from this really fascinating collection of readings and philosophical musings titled The Right Building, Day 131, May 11. It poses this terrifying question.
Terrifying is the right word.
Right. Because what if you spend your entire life climbing and you get to the very top and you look around, completely breathless and triumphant, and you realize your ladder was leaning against the wrong building?
I mean, that is just the ultimate tragedy of competence misdirected.
Yeah.
You can be incredibly disciplined, completely focused, undeniably brilliant even, and still arrive in exactly the wrong destination.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And the mission today is to explore this philosophy, to understand what it actually means to live an examined life.
Yeah.
So you can avoid that exact fate.
So basically, before you start climbing, you absolutely have to check the building.
Exactly. And this framework we're looking at, it organizes the philosophy not as some linear checklist, but as 5 interconnected themes.
Right, and they all radiate out from a single center point.
Yeah, that center being the self.
Yeah.
And from there, it expands outward into simplicity, civility, team ability, and then finally perfection.
It's totally an integrated practice.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
You really can't compartmentalize these areas. They just feed into one another continuously.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we promised you, the listener, a roadmap to clarity without the usual information overload. So let's start right at that center point, the inner world. Because logically, you just can't start climbing any ladder until you inspect the ground you're actually standing on.
No, you can't.
The starting point, and honestly, often the biggest obstacle to a well-directed life, is you.
Yeah, your inner condition completely determines your outer world. There is this incredible parable from Anthony de Mello about a happy monastery that just illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, I love this one.
It's so good. So a student goes to the masters, and he's deeply frustrated.
All right.
And he asks why everyone else in the monastery seems so joy-filled.
Like, what are they seeing that I'm missing?
Exactly. The student wants to know why the others see goodness and beauty everywhere, while he basically only sees mundane routine. So he asks, why don't I see it?
And the master's response is just brilliant.
He replies, because you cannot see outside of you what you feel to see inside.
Wow. It just compresses this massive psychological truth into, what, 2 sentences?
Pretty much, yeah.
Because if the mechanism to perceive goodness isn't built internally, then honestly, no amount of external beauty is going to register at all.
Right. And the poet Rumi approaches that exact same fundamental truth from just a slightly different angle.
Oh, right, the ocean quote.
Yeah. He wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop."
Which means the inner life isn't just some secondary small thing you deal with on the weekends or whatever.
Exactly. It contains everything.
And then Les Brown takes this from the poetic to the highly tactical.
He really does.
Because he says, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm.
Yeah, when your inner house is in order, external chaos just loses its grip.
Because of projection, right?
Exactly. The psychological mechanism of projection means we are very often fighting external battles that are actually just reflections of our own internal unresolved conflicts.
So if you fix the inside, the outside threat level just drops dramatically.
It drops to almost zero, yeah.
But keeping that internal house in order is, well, it's a daily struggle.
Oh, for sure.
The author Ryan Holiday reflects on Cormac McCarthy's incredibly bleak post-apocalyptic novel, The Road.
Such a heavy book.
Really heavy. In that book, they are walking through this destroyed world, and the child is constantly asking his father, are we still the good guys?
Right.
And Holiday points out that children ask this because they haven't yet been hardened by the slow, creeping accumulation of small compromises that adults make over a lifetime.
Yeah, because we rarely become something we hate through one giant, dramatic, cinematic failure.
And it's never just one big moment.
No, it is the gradual callousness creeping in just a tiny fraction of a degree every single day.
Yeah.
You bend a rule here, you ignore a moral instinct there, and suddenly, years later, you are entirely off course.
Which brings up the rule laid out here, and it's incredibly stark. If our daily practice makes us worse, it is ridiculous.
It really is that simple.
But I have to admit, reading that makes me want to push back just a little bit on behalf of the listener.
Okay, let's hear it.
Isn't it exhausting to constantly self-police like this? I mean, asking yourself every single day with every minor decision, is this making me worse?
I can see how it sounds tiring.
Right. It feels like constantly putting down the oars to check the compass while you are trying to row a boat across the ocean.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Every time you stop to evaluate if you are still the quote-unquote good guy, you just lose all your forward momentum.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you really have to weigh momentum against direction.
Okay, how so?
Because if you don't check the compass, your momentum might just be rowing you faster and faster toward a reef.
Oh, yeah, fair point.
It is not about a paranoid, exhausting kind of self-policing. It is the realization that there is simply no neutral ground.
You're either moving forward or drifting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are either actively maintaining the ship or the ocean is degrading it. Every single choice, every daily habit is actively building your character, or it is eroding it.
So it's not supposed to be exhausting.
Right, recognizing that isn't supposed to be exhausting. It just means you actually have your hands on the wheel.
I really like that. That distinction between momentum and direction makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But once that inner self is sorted and your hands are firmly on the wheel, you immediately run into the problem of the external world.
Oh, the noise.
The noise. How do you keep from getting overwhelmed by the sheer volume of choices and just everything out there?
Well, inner clarity demands outer simplicity.
Right. And George Raveling's 3 rules of simplicity provide a great framework for this.
They absolutely do. He argues that simplicity isn't just an aesthetic choice or some trendy minimalist lifestyle thing.
Yeah, it's not just having a clean desk.
No, it is the absolute master skill for high achievement. And his 3 rules are: 1, understand the destination; 2, understand what matters most; and 3, realize that clutter gets in the way.
And the historical convergence used to back this up in the source material is honestly staggering.
It really blew my mind.
Right. Michelangelo painted the entire Sistine Chapel using just 7 colors.
Unbelievable.
Beethoven composed his absolute masterworks using only 7 notes. Ernest Hemingway governed his legendary prose with just 4 writing rules.
And you even see it in finance.
Exactly. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger explicitly cite a, quote, passion for keeping things simple, end quote, as the secret to their whole investing empire.
But why just 7 colors for Michelangelo?
Right. Why limit yourself?
Because artificial constraints force true creativity. When you cannot rely on an endless palette of options to mask a lazy composition, you are forced to master the absolute fundamental relationships between light, shadow, and form.
The constraint literally forces the genius to the surface.
Yes.
Yeah.
Limiting options isn't about making the work easier. It is about making the work incredibly dense and potent.
Which echoes what Steve Jobs said, right?
Yeah, Jobs noted that clean thinking to achieve simplicity is actually much harder than complex thinking.
Because adding things is just the default human response to any problem.
Wow.
Subtracting takes ruthless discipline. Michael LaBouffe observes that most stress comes from simply overestimating the importance of our problems.
We really do that.
We treat every incoming email or minor setback like a massive crisis, which just adds mental clutter.
Right. And this ties perfectly into that gardening metaphor from legendary football coach Bill Walsh.
Oh yeah, I love this one.
Walsh says that merely pulling weeds isn't enough.
Because if you just clear the dirt.
Exactly. The flowers still die without directed attention, like sunlight and water.
So simplicity is not merely subtraction.
No, it is directed attention. You aren't just emptying your life for the sake of having an empty life.
You are actively pouring all your limited resources into watering what actually matters.
Spot on.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The analogy that comes to mind is a museum exhibit.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because simplicity isn't an empty white room. An empty room is just a vacant building. Simplicity is a highly curated museum exhibit.
Right, someone made choices.
Exactly. The curator worked incredibly hard, spending thousands of unseen hours behind the scenes to remove everything, every distraction, every secondary piece of history, except the exact masterpiece you need to see.
The blank space is there specifically to highlight the art.
Yes.
And without that curation, without simplicity acting as the enabling condition, your effort completely scatters.
You lose your clarity.
You lose it, the noise takes over, and suddenly your ladder is leaning against whatever building happens to be nearby simply because it was the closest one.
Which brings us right back to the core danger. But here is where the minimalist approach hits a wall.
Okay?
You can curate your inner museum perfectly, right? You can clear all your clutter, but the minute you walk outside, you collide with other people's clutter.
Oh, immediately.
How do you protect your simplicity in a chaotic, noisy society where everyone else is panicking?
You have to build a buffer.
And according to this framework, that buffer is the rigorous practice of civility.
Yeah, it is worth looking at a really interesting historical data point this deep dive brings up.
And we should clarify, we are looking at this not as a political statement, but purely as a factual case study.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
No taking sides here, just reporting the facts of how society responds to the mere suggestion of civility.
Right.
So Mark DeMoss, coming from the conservative right, and Lanny Davis from the Democratic left, teamed up for this bipartisan effort.
Two guys from totally opposite sides.
Exactly. And they sent out 585 letters to sitting U.S. governors and members of Congress, basically asking them to sign a very basic 3-sentence civility pledge.
Just 3 sentences.
Right. It just asked them to be respectful in public discourse, regardless of their disagreements.
And the result was pretty shocking. Out of 585 letters sent to the absolute highest levels of leadership,
Guess how many respond?
only 3.
3.
It's wild.
It really highlights how modern society has largely turned a blind eye to incivility. We view it as a necessary weapon rather than a
Wow.
destructive force.
Yeah. And Tony Dungy points out something super interesting about this. He says people often use religious or righteous justifications for their bad behavior. Oh, all the time.
They'll compare themselves to Jesus turning over the tables in the temple just to justify screaming at someone on the internet.
Which Dungy argues is almost always a veil.
Right.
It is an excuse to be mean, self-important, and honestly just driven entirely by ego.
Now, the uncommon key outlined in this material states that civility is really about word choice and presentation.
Yes.
It connects this to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10, which talks about being united in thought and purpose, even across deep differences.
And it also brings in Confucius.
Right, who said, "The man who asks a question is a fool for a minute. The man who doesn't is a fool for life."
So the mechanism of civility here is reframed entirely through that Confucius quote. It's
Yeah.
about genuine curiosity.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
If we're supposed to be stripping away the non-essentials, like we literally just talked about with radical simplicity,
Right.
couldn't civility just be seen as unnecessary clutter? Like, isn't it just performative politeness?
I see where you're going. Because when the stakes are really high, taking the time to sugarcoat things feels like a waste of energy that gets in the way of the blunt truth.
Well, this raises an important question, and it is honestly a trap a lot of highly driven people fall into.
Okay.
Civility is not false agreement.
Right.
It is not mere passive nicety or performative politeness. It is a much higher standard of engagement.
How so?
Taking the time to be genuinely curious about another person's viewpoint, choosing your words meticulously so that the message bypasses their defensive shields and can actually be heard, that is an active, rigorous discipline.
Wow, yeah. It takes immense self-control to not just react.
Exactly. Blunt truth without civility is just verbal assault, and let's be honest, it rarely changes anyone's mind.
Never does.
Civility is not clutter. It is the lubricant that keeps society's engine from seizing up and tearing itself apart.
Okay, that makes total sense. But moving from just coexisting to actually building something together requires another massive shift.
It does.
Civility keeps us from destroying each other. But how do we take that subordination of our own ego to the next level? How do we build a collective force?
Which brings us to team ability.
Team ability.
The framework draws heavily from elite military units here, specifically the Navy SEALs and Delta Force.
Some of the highest performing teams on Earth.
Absolutely. And when you look at these teams, you see something entirely counterintuitive. They don't just recruit the most talented individuals and point them at a target.
Right.
They build a highly specific culture where those incredibly talented, highly alpha individuals willingly subordinate their own personal preferences.
Including their preference to lead.
Exactly,
Yeah.
to the mission itself.
It's crazy because in these elite units, leadership actually flows dynamically to the person with the most relevant expertise in that exact 3-second window.
Yeah.
Not the person with the highest rank on their collar.
And subordinating the ego in this context,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like a motivational poster for a corporate retreat.
Hang in there, right?
Right. But in reality, it is a terrifying, ruthless strategy.
Yeah.
These operators prioritize the best idea over the highest rank because, in life or death situations, ego literally gets you killed.
So what makes up that culture?
The culture relies on 5 key aspects:
Mm-hmm.
open and truthful communication,
Okay.
interdependence and mutual trust,
Mm.
shared goal orientation, adaptability, which, by the way, includes a strict ban on the phrase, "this is how we've always done it,"
I love that ban.
and finally, constructive conflict management.
And their code of conduct is distilled into just 3 words: team, teammate, self.
That is the unbreakable hierarchy.
Which connects directly to Aristotle's principle of synergy, the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
And it pairs beautifully with Bill Walsh's philosophy again. He used to say the score takes care of itself.
Which means if you perfect the process and subordinate the ego to the team, you don't even need to look at the scoreboard.
The outcome is just the natural byproduct of the mechanism.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Synergy is not some magical byproduct of just putting highly talented people in a room together.
Definitely not.
A room full of geniuses who don't trust each other will produce less than a room full of average people who operate with absolute interdependence.
It is like watching a world-class jazz ensemble.
Dude, perfect analogy.
Right. When they're on stage, playing perfectly in the pocket, the solo organically goes to whoever has the melody at that exact moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to the person who sold the most records last year or, who demanded the biggest dressing room.
Right.
The individual ego completely dissolves into the music, and the music becomes something literally none of them could have written alone.
Because a highly talented group of jazz musicians trying to outplay one another, constantly fighting for the spotlight.
Just chaotic noise.
Exactly.
Think?
They will produce less than the sum of their parts. Achieving that synergy requires absolute adherence to the team, teammate, self-hierarchy. It is a deliberate, friction-heavy process of letting go of the self.
So you've aligned your internal compass.
Sure.
You've stripped away the noise to find a simple path. You've learned to navigate the friction of other people through civility. And you've subordinated your ego to a shared mission.
Right.
But what is the mission? Where is this finely tuned, highly capable apparatus actually going?
Which brings us to the final theme: perfection as a direction.
Perfection.
The author Leo Tolstoy provides this beautiful metaphor to explain how this works in practice. He describes a navigator commanding a ship.
Okay.
When you are close to shore, navigating is relatively easy. You use landmarks, you can visually confirm the coastline, the mountains, the ports.
Sure, it's right there.
But when you are deep in the ocean, far from any visible land, you lose those easy markers. You only have the compass and the stars.
And the stars represent perfection.
Exactly. Perfection isn't a port you can ever actually dock at. It is a direction you steer by.
That's beautiful.
Tolstoy argues that understanding what currently exists is merely description.
Okay.
But understanding what can be achieved, looking at the stars, that is aspiration.
And aspiration is the agent that actually moves human progress forward.
It absolutely is.
But this requires a very specific kind of endurance, doesn't it?
It does.
Ralph Waldo Emerson's definition of a hero captures this perfectly. He says a hero is no braver than an ordinary man, but he is brave 5 minutes longer.
I love that quote. It isn't about superhuman strength. It is about sustaining the direction, just a fraction longer than the resistance.
Yeah. And Gandhi is quoted as saying, "The future depends on what you do today."
Which ties perfectly into what Confucius says about our timeline. He said, we have 2 lives, and the second begins when we realize we only have one.
That one hits hard.
It really does. Pulling all these diverse texts together, the military strategy, the spiritual parables, the philosophical quotes, the coaching methodologies, it reveals a hidden, unifying truth.
Which is?
Genuine greatness requires extreme ambition paired with radical subtraction. You have to aim higher, but you can only do that by carrying significantly less baggage.
And the document closes its textual analysis with this quote from President Herbert Hoover, which kind of brings a wry dose of reality to all this lofty ambition.
Oh yeah, I love this part.
He said, "About the time we can make ends meet, somebody moves the ends."
It's so true. The goalposts are always shifting. The definition of success is always evolving.
But this adaptation isn't a flaw in the design of life.
No, it is the practice itself. The ends keep moving specifically so that we are forced to keep recalibrating. If we ever actually, quote-unquote, arrived, the growth would just stop.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Right.
If the ends keep moving and you can never actually reach the stars of perfection, how do you avoid the creeping despair of feeling like you are never, ever going to arrive?
It sounds like a recipe for permanent dissatisfaction.
Exactly.
But what's fascinating here is that the philosophy answers that exact fear with perhaps the quietest, most radical sentence in the entire collection.
Which
You
is,
can always start again.
wow.
The lack of an arrival point isn't a curse. It is a profound grace. It means that no matter how far off course your ship drifts, no matter how many times you fail to be civil, or let your ego override the team, or let clutter fill your life, the compass is always available to you.
The stars are always up there.
They're always up there. You just have to look up, reset your bearing, and start again.
That is incredibly freeing. Let's quickly trace the map we've built today for everyone.
Sounds good.
We started by tending to the inner self, recognizing that you cannot perceive outside what you lack the mechanism to see inside.
Right.
Then we stripped away the noise, realizing that artificial constraints and radical simplicity actually force mastery.
Yep.
Then we explored civility, not as some polite clutter, but as an active, rigorous discipline to navigate a really chaotic world.
Exactly.
We broke down team ability, where subordinating the ego is a ruthless strategy for survival and synergy.
Spot on.
And finally, we looked to the stars, treating perfection as a direction to steer by, rather than a destination to reach.
Yeah.
That is the holistic practice to ensure your ladder is leaning against the right building.
It really is. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you step back into your day.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent all this time exploring how to ensure your ladder is on the right building before you start to climb.
Right.
But what if you are listening to this right now and you are already halfway up?
Oh.
You pause, you look around, you check your internal compass, and you realize it is the wrong wall.
That is a terrifying moment.
It is. But the bravest thing you might ever do in your entire life isn't grinding it out and climbing higher. The bravest thing might just be having the courage to climb back down, pick up your ladder, and carry it somewhere else.
Sometimes the bravest step is the one back down to the ground.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep checking your compass, keep looking at the stars, and most importantly, keep leaning your ladders right. We'll catch you next time.